that there are only two things that are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. No.
But they work like that with Earth in space, do they? No, mate, that violates natural law.
Seriously, he's come prepared. He's got a killer question, which he thinks is going to stump me on astronomy. You know, me, the guy who filmed an entire rotation of Jupiter in a single night. Someone who's watched the sun rotate over days, done time lapses of the surface of the sun. Someone who went halfway around the world to watch a transit of Venus. Someone who's watched sunset on the moon and cometary impacts on Jupiter.
Which telescope was this again?
60-inch. Mount Wilson.
Mount Wilson. This is the largest optical telescope.
Available to the public in the world on a continual basis.
And what's that black spot again?
That's the impact scar of either a comet or an asteroid. I'm guessing it's a daughter of Shoemaker-Levy 9.
Filmed both lunar and solar eclipses. In fact, I've been doing astronomy so long that I've not seen a sunrise for years. But as for, does the moon produce its own light? Well, that was a really interesting scientific debate about 500 years ago.
Let's start with that. That's an oxymoron, scientific debate. Science elucidates the cause of a natural phenomena. This is done by way of hypothesis-based, systematic experimentation. You establish the cause of an effect by observing said effect, formulating a viable hypothesis with an alternative and a null, and then varying and manipulating that which you assume caused the effect to see if you can actually cause the effect. That is science. Upon variation and manipulation of said presumed cause of the effect, you validate your alternative hypothesis. That would be to say, if A, then B. Your null hypothesis, which would be disregarded upon validation of your supposition that A causes B, can be thrown out because if A, not B, is obviously no longer valid if you have validated your cause of the effect. If, however, you vary and manipulate that which you assume causes an effect, and it does not cause the effect, you validate your null hypothesis. For this reason, the scientific method, that would be science, is empirical. There is no debate, there is no discussion, there is only systematic experimentation to validate a supposition of cause. Upon this experimentation, you either validate or invalidate the cause of the effect. This method is well established, and it seems Thunderf00t the mathematician, who claims to be a scientist, feels that science is a matter of discussion. It isn't. Thunderf00t has absolutely zero scientific acumen if he feels that systematic experimentation is up for debate. It is not. I am a flat earther, and I am telling Thunderf00t, the pretender clown muppet, that he doesn't know what science is.
How can you have gas pressure when we all know if you open up a container to the vacuum of space, the gas shoots out of it? Checkmate, globetards. And
It's called the second law of thermodynamics. So unless you can demonstrate that you can have gas pressure without a container...
Well, you know that big warm glowy thing in the sky? The sun. You know what it is? It's a giant ball of gas. Curiously enough, with no container, exposed to that same 10 to the minus 17 tall vacuum. Yet, oddly enough, it doesn't shoot off into space somehow. Odd that. And how do we know it's a big ball of gas? Why? From the spectrum, of course. In fact, you know helium. You know why it's called helium? Because it was first discovered from the spectral lines of the sun. helium, from the Greek helios, meaning sun. And that was before it was discovered here on Earth. Or hell, what about Jupiter? Also, kind of a giant ball of gas without a container, somehow happily sitting there. How did you say violating the second law of thermodynamics?
Your example actually includes the second law of thermodynamics violation, because I don't claim science where there isn't any.
It's called gravity, you muppet. And the great thing about gravity is I don't think even the flat earthers deny gravity. You know, if I get an object with mass and another object with mass, they're attracted to each other, and it's something you can simply measure in the lab.
Any scientific evidence of gravity? Well, what have we here? It's the 105-year out-of-date rhetoric that is the Cavendish experiment. Oh dear, Thunderfoot. Did you not know? This was superseded by the Einsteinian nonsense you mentioned earlier. Now, Einsteinian gravity, as I say, superseded this Cavendish, Reverend John Michell and C.V. Boy's gravity 105 years ago. Gravity is not a force. That would be quote from George Musa, Scientific American, or, if you prefer, Brian Cox. Gravity is not really a force at all. So given that you're under this misapprehension with this Cavendish experiment, utilising a 100-year out-of-date rhetoric of mass attracting mass, when gravity's actually the bending of a conceptual medium known as pseudo-Ramonian force space. You can't bend concepts, and thinking about them as much as you like won't give rise to any force that would require gas to have an escape velocity. You simply don't know what gravity is. You're 105 years out of date. You're parroting the wrong pseudoscience.
Apparently, they do deny gravity, but okay, fine. They must at least acknowledge that if they drop things, they fall towards the ground.
Oh shit!
We'll call that gravity for the moment. And gravity is awesome because if I drop two objects, one of them light, one of them heavy, they both fall at the same speed.
Oh shit!
That's only the case because I've slowed down time about 1 billion times as well. Those molecules there are travelling at about the speed of sound. But anyway, with any statistical ensemble like this, if you plot up the energy of the molecules versus the number of molecules that have that energy, you get something like this. It's called a Boltzmann distribution. It's probably one of the most important things you can understand in science. With any statistical ensemble like this, so if I let all of these molecules out, they go up into the sky, of course, they gain potential energy. And that's kind of the very definition of gas pressure, is it's the number of collisions per unit area.
Per unit area? Area of what now? Oh, that would be the area of the container the gas has to fill now, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So looked at like this, yeah, it's actually pretty easy to get an atmospheric pressure without a container.
Yeah, we're going to need a demonstration of this, not you parroting some nonsense off Wikipedia, I'm afraid, Thunderfoot.
And the average speed for the gas molecules here on Earth is about 1/3 of a kilometre per second. Now, sure, the details of losing gas molecules to space is a little more complicated than this. You know, if you're getting high energy particles from the sun bombarding the atmosphere or something like that in science, then those can give molecules escape velocity. But as a general model, this isn't too bad in science. Any statistical ensemble like this.
Put it in a more concise way, what we're defining is the fact that in the heliocentric model, the spinning ball Earth religion, as you phrase it, you've got a pressurized system. We all observe gas pressure. We're breathing it in and out right now. But it's right next to a vacuum. So there's no lid, in essence.
That's why we ask, show us the non-physical container.
Gee, not so sure I can make this any simpler, but I'll try. Imagine you've got some perfectly bouncy balls in a fish tank, and the fish tank has no lid on it in science. And none of those balls have enough energy to bounce out of the box in science. Now imagine those balls are actually gas molecules, and boom! a lidless container holding a finite pressure of gas. So yeah, knowing little more than if you drop an object, then it will fall, and that gas molecules are objects. You can understand why things like the sun, which are basically giant balls of gas, even though they don't have a container,
No, mate, that violates natural law.
they don't evaporate into space. And the same goes with Jupiter and Saturn, or hell, for that matter, any planet with an atmosphere.
No, mate, that violates natural law.
Now, our flat earther here seems remarkably offended that I get praised for debunking crap while he gets criticised for spouting it.
Now, without getting into the moans about, well, you get held up and praised, 900,000 subscribers, I get called a shill and ridiculed for being a flat earther. But that's excused by the masses, because they're all programmed with this to believe the sky is a vacuum.
I know, the double standards,
Let's just summarise what happened on Thunderf00t's video. He essentially used 105-year out-of-date rhetoric from Cavendish / Reverend John Michell / CV Boys, which has been superseded by Einsteinian pseudoscience of bending conceptual mediums known as pseudo-Riemannian force space. So if we ignore all ad homs and red herrings, we get him asserting that astronomy is science. No, it's not. It has no viable hypotheses to offer. We've been asking for about a year. You won't provide us with one. Astronomy is not science. If you want to disprove this, simply provide a viable hypothesis in anything you have done in astronomy. Now, when we ask how you can have gas pressure without a container, showing us lights in the sky and claiming that they also stand in violation of the second law of thermodynamics, that would be the entropy law, by simply asserting that that is also a burning ball of gas in a vacuum, is merely you begging the question and pointing to your fundamentalist religious zealotry to prove your religious zealotry. The sky cannot be a vacuum. It stands in violation of natural law. Without the container, there can be no pressure. Now, if you feel that you have a force that can hold the gas here in violation of entropy, then maybe I need to educate you about the current rhetoric of gravity, with a few quotes. George Musa, Scientific American. Gravity is not a force, but you can think of it as a force. George Musa, 2019. Thinking about bending pseudo-Riemannian force space will not give rise to any force. Bending concepts like freedom is not possible. Now, maybe you don't like George Musa's quote. Maybe a professor would suit you better, like Brian Cox. Gravity is not really a force at all. Professor Brian Cox. See reification fallacy if you want to think of it as a force. Now, 13 minutes 17 on your video, you say per unit area when describing gas pressure. Well, now, area of what exactly? Oh, that would be the area of the container the gas has to fill. So the globe doesn't have an area at the top for the gas to fill, and we've already established that it doesn't need this downward vector of gravity when it's expanding in all directions. Just for the audience's benefit, there was no science whatsoever in any of the nonsense asserted by Thunderf00t by utilisation of his fundamentalist religious zealotry. He also asserts at 13 minutes 37 that it's easy to get gas pressure without a container. No, that would be a violation of natural law, and we're going to need a demonstration of this violation of natural law beyond your fundamentalist religious zealotry pointing at a sky vacuum and claiming the lights stand in violation of that natural law, or your CGI rendering of a globe in violation of natural law. It's fairly simple. We're going to need a practical demonstration. When you're debunking guys who claim vacuum chambers can do things they don't, you provided a practical demonstration, and yet we get told to imagine that a solid bouncy ball is analogous to a gas which expands in all directions. It's not. We don't need to imagine anything. We need to work at the really is level, not at the mathematical reified level, which you seem to be working at, to reify your fundamentalist religious zealotry that the sky is a vacuum. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next Thunderf00t video.